What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Tyrant's Halo 4 review. Today I'm going to break this review down in 7 parts. That's right, you heard correctly, 7. Bungie's magic number. So let's get started, shall we? Part 1. First up on the chopping block. Does this game feel like Halo? Well, I've got some good news for you. Not only does it feel like Halo, but 343 definitely hit it out of the park. So for those of you who are afraid that you are going to buy a different game with the same title, fear not. 343 Industries does deliver. Okay, now that we got the big question out of the way, let's move forward. Campaign. That's right up my alley. You know exactly right. The story is probably one of the best in the Halo series. The story is so good that you could watch this game like a movie and still be entertained. The characters have a lot of depth to them. You have a lot of feelings for Cortana, not to mention she's damn hot. And you get to see into the depths and soul of the Master Chief himself. Not to mention the UNSC Marines like Lasky and that really douchebag captain guy. You know, you get to know these guys and they all feel very different. They're not static characters. So what about the missions themselves? Well, the bad news is that Halo 4 has the least amount of missions than any other Halo game. It only has 8. But the good news is that these missions are chock full of content. They're huge. They're some of the longest missions in the Halo series. Some of these missions took me an hour the first time through. And in most of these missions, they also give you a lot of room to explore. A lot of these battlefields are huge. The unfortunate downside is that the return to battlefield thing from Halo Reach made it back in. Now, I don't recommend this for developers. The reason is, first of all, this promotes exploration in your valuable terrain that you took all that time to build. You shouldn't do this. It increases replayability and it doesn't hurt anybody. My recommendation for future Halo games is to leave that out. But even despite that, the missions themselves still have plenty of room to explore. My personal favorite mission is Reclaimer. You have tons of weapons and vehicles at your disposal, lots of variations in combat, including going up into a Covenant Lich, and it's by far my favorite mission of the game, and maybe even one of my favorite missions in the series, as opposed to missions like Midnight, that have very linear combat, and it's all orange. Background, enemies, weapons, weapon projectiles. I still can't see that goddamn incineration cannon. All aside though, the campaign has a lot of depth to it, a lot of replayability, and that itself has sold me on this. Now obviously we can't do campaign without multiplayer. Now unfortunately, if you know me, you know that I don't experience a lot of multiplayer. But I have still played the Halo 4 multiplayer and I can give it a fair comparison. Now first of all, big maps have been well introduced into Halo 4. In fact, the majority of the maps are big team battle maps. Now I personally love big team battle. I love the fact that you can choose between weapons and vehicles, and there's lots of variations in combat. Unfortunately, this isn't so hot for the competitive community, who prefers 4v4 maps than 2v2. Hopefully we'll see more of these in future expansion packs, but in the meantime, big team battle is going to have to do for everybody. I was very happy to see some of the fun game types from Halo Reach and Halo 3 make it back into Halo 4. Game types like Riftball and Living Dead, or in Halo 4 as they call it, Flood mode. You don't just die and switch to the other team in Flood mode, you actually become a Flood zombie. I'm craving some brains right now, Clarice. Now the one thing I'm not quite sure about yet is the loadout system. Basically, weapon spawns have been almost entirely removed from the game and replaced by the loadouts from Reach along with ordnance drops. Now this does make the game more interesting and it makes weapons a little bit more randomized, so you never know who's going to have what. But at the same time, it's nice to have the familiarity of the rocket launcher spawns, the fuel rod gun, the sniper rifle, and all that's gone. So the jury's still out on this one, and I know the competitive community might have some trouble with it too. Hopefully this will be resolved in future playlists for people who prefer the classic mode instead of the new age material. Next up, we have enemies. Now, of course, the Covenant have made their dramatic return to Halo 4, and it's not just any Covenant either, it's the Storm faction. These guys are more fanatical, and they're just crazy. Now, what this does mean is that some of the newer races that were introduced in later Halo games, like the Brutes and the Drones and the Engineers, didn't make it in. But I wasn't a big fan of the Brutes anyway, and I just outright hated the Drones. The Engineers served well in ODST, but they really didn't serve any real purpose in Halo 4. All in all, this means that you have your classic Covenant back with the Grunts, the jackals, the elites, and the hunters, and they look absolutely spectacular. They've even thrown some new weapons for them in the mix. But now we get to the new race that was added for the first time since Halo 1. These guys are called the Prometheans. And I will tell you that, in my opinion, they are even scarier than the Flood. Basically, they're an artificial intelligence that's controlled by either the Didact or the Librarian, which also, by the way, affects what color they are. Now, these guys integrate very well with each other. All three main species complement one another very well. First up, we have the Crawlers. Now, these guys remind me of the Flood quite a bit in the fact that they attack you en masse, and for the most part, their weapons are inaccurate. They're also pretty tough to kill unless you shoot them directly in the head. But the good news is that their weapons are built directly into the dome, so once they're down, feel free to pick them up. Next up, we have the Watchers. Now, I'm not too sure about these guys. By themselves, they're like floating turret things, but their superpowers make them a little bit more controversial. First of all, they can shield their allies with hard light. Next up, they can actually spawn more crawlers into the battlefield. And the one that I hate the most is they can resurrect dead Promethean knights within a given period of time. Which brings me to the final race, the Promethean Knights. They're bigger than elites, almost bigger than hunters, and are the most broken, overpowered motherfuckers in the Halo series. First of all, these guys have shields like elites. But like brutes from Halo 2 and Halo Reach, once their shields are down, it takes multiple headshots to kill them. They can throw grenades at you, they can wield almost any weapon in the Promethean arsenal, including the one-shot binary rifle and the also one-shot incineration cannon. And if that weren't bad enough, they have some pretty cheap tactics up their sleeve, like warp rushing you all the way across the room. And just when you get their shields down and you're getting that kill shot lined up, they magically teleport away. 343 Industries, if you're listening, I think the Prometheans are a great race to add to the Halo franchise, but they definitely need to be tweaked a little bit. The Promethean Knights especially are just way too overpowered, and at times downright frustrating. Now let's move on to graphics, because obviously the next generation Halo is going to have graphics far superior to the previous one, and Halo 4 does not disappoint. The graphics are the most superior that you have seen in Halo, in almost any video game for that matter. They even make Crisis look bad, for God's sake. And if teenagers weren't chronically masturbating to Cortana before, they will be now. This is some of the best lighting I've ever seen, and I've also noticed that they seem to be moving away from the borderline cartoon style that's been known for the previous Halo titles, and seem to be getting more into a realistic approach, which I personally love. The downside to the graphics is the weapon trash despawn system. This has gradually gotten worse since the first Halo game, and is really, really bad in Halo 4. Sometimes an enemy can drop a weapon, and the weapon will despawn before you can even get to it. While I do consider graphics to be somewhat important, this is not a price I'm willing to pay. For future Halo games, please do not make weapons disappear that easily. The other minor complaint that I have is that when it comes to things like elites and Promethean Knights, it's very hard to tell the individual ranks. Now, I myself am colorblind, so if it weren't for the individual hats of the elites, which still aren't that indistinguishable from each other, it would be very difficult to tell whether I'm facing a general or a minor. Now, despite these shortcomings, I definitely give the graphics of Halo 4 an A+. Bravo, excellent work. You have definitely raised the bar. And finally, we get to my last main point, what has been removed from the game. Now, if you know my good buddy RC Master, he has a 17-minute long bitch video about what is missing from Halo 4. It's actually a very good read and a very good watch. I highly recommend heading over to his channel to give it a look. But to give you a brief rundown, let's go over some of the few things that are just important that need to be added back in. The first up is theater mode for campaign. Now, this has set some communities like High Speed Halo and my very own Mythic community back years. It gave people definitive proof that they did what they did, and also gave people lots of fun opportunities to check out AI fails. It gave things for fails of the week on Rooster Teeth. All of that has been removed, including screenshots. We don't even have theater mode for Spartan Ops, which brings me to my next campaign removal, which is metascoring. This was an excellent incentive to use skulls in Halo 3, ODST, and Reach. It set the precedence for challenges, and even gave people a reason to compete with each other while playing in the same game. This made the game more fun and far more replayable, and I really think this should be added back in. Personally, I don't see why this was removed to begin with. It seems like a very easy feature to add in, and best of all, it makes the competitive community especially those of us who enjoy campaign, far happier, and it's far more replayable. Next up, they actually cut Firefight. Now this was first introduced in Halo 3 ODST, and it basically allows the player to combat enemies outside of the campaign story points, and also just for general practice. And it's just overall a lot of fun. Personally, ODST was my favorite, and when Halo Reach rolled around, they made a lot of progress. They finally added friendly AI in the last map pack for Halo Reach. I had such high hopes for Halo 4, but they cut Firefight entirely. Now some say they replaced this with Spartan Ops, and don't get me wrong, I love Spartan Ops and I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm looking forward to the new episodes that come out. It expands the story, but at the same time, I don't think this was a great excuse to cut Firefight mode. It was a major game type and a lot of people enjoyed it. They also slashed matchmaking for both campaign and Spartan Ops. This had been in demand since Halo 3 ODST. They finally implemented it in Reach, and now they take it away from us. I'm not sure what the incentive behind that was, but hopefully we'll see this changed in the future. And last but not least, weapon variety was also cut severely in Halo 4. This is the worst I've ever seen it. Now for those of you who know me pretty well, you know that if there's one thing I hate in a Halo game, it's weapon redundancy. And essentially what they did here is they took all the human weapons and copy-pasted them for the Covenant and then again for the Prometheans. So basically you end up with 3 different kinds of sniper rifles, basically 3 different kinds of shotguns if you count the bolt shot, and 5 different kinds of pinpoint weapons. You've got the Magnum with the zoom capability, you've got the DMR, the battle rifle, the Covenant carbine, and the light rifle. Now some people say that this promotes variety, because you get to basically choose all these different weapons. I say it does the polar opposite. It actually demotes variety. You don't have these individual weapons anymore. You don't have uniqueness on the battlefield. You basically just have a Skittles palette of weapons. You can choose what color pinpoint weapon you want, what color projectiles you want them to have. We've had new variations in weapons ever since Halo 2. In Halo 2 they introduced the energy sword and the sentinel beam. In Halo 3 we saw the Spartan laser and the gravity hammer. In Halo Reach we saw the plasma launcher, but in Halo 4 there are no new variations at all. You've got heavy weapons, you've got sniper weapons, you've got automatic weapons, and mid-range weapons. Every weapon can be divided into that group. There is no special weapon, there's no variation. Oh, and short-range weapons. But there's no uniqueness to any of them. Personally, I think this shows lack of creativity, and I hope to see a change in Halo 5. So now that the bitching is out of the way, what is my overall rating of Halo 4? Well, despite all the complaining that I just did, I give Halo 4 a 9 out of 10. Why? Because overall, it is still a great game that I'm going to enjoy for years. No Halo game has ever been perfect, and you know 343 Industries hit the nail on the head because not only does it feel like a Halo game, but you have the same type of brainless form reactions that you've ever had before. Basically, pre-launch, it was all the hype that it was going to be the best Halo game in the world. Post-launch, it was, this is the worst Halo ever. So if the motive 343 Industries was going for was to make this feel like a Halo game, they hit the nail on the head. Not just in the way the game plays, but in the longevity. I don't buy very many games. So what I do, I want it to be one that's going to last a long time. And I know that a year or 2 from now, I'm still going to be playing Halo 4. If you haven't bought Halo 4 yet and you're tinkering on the idea, go out to the store right now, go buy it. If you can find the Legendary Edition, there's lots of extra content in there like Forward Unto Dawn and the soundtrack, and lots of other cool codes and avatar items as well. This is a great game. I'm still having fun playing this game, and if you haven't played it yet, you need to go to your local game store, pick up a copy, put it in your Xbox right now. 343 Industries, I'm very proud of you. You have carried the torch well. If anyone had to make this game other than my beloved Bungie, I'm glad it was you. Thank you for all the wonderful things you have done so far, and I greatly look forward to Halo 5. This has been Tyrant's Halo 4 review. If you liked it, rate, comment, and subscribe. Feel free to ask me questions in the comments below. And of course, keep an eye out for my Halo 4 Legendary, Mythic, and Co-op guides. I hope you enjoyed this review. And as always, I'm the Tyrant, signing off.